Hi, this is Informed TV 100 and happy Black History Month. We are going to do another reading for the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, written by himself. So, as we where we left off that there was a slave handler, Mr. Gore, on the plantation that Frederick Douglass lived on. He unfairly beat a slave, and the slave ran into water, and uh, he got executed, shot. Uh, by Mr. Gore, and Mr. Gore didn't lose his job. He said he was setting an example to keep the slaves in place. So this is where we left off. Now, this is Inform TV 100. I hope you stick with these readings to the end so we can follow Frederick Douglass, an American slave written by himself. He tells us in his book the real, actual life of a slave, which he was a slave in a part of his life. Okay. So, in Talbot County, killing a slave or any other black is not treated as a crime. Thomas Layman of St. Michael's killed two slaves. He killed one with a hatchet, knocking his brains out. He used to boast about the awful deed. I have heard him laugh as he did so, saying that others should think him and do as he had done. That way, the country soon would be rid of the damn niggers. The wife of Mr. Giles Hicks, who lived near where I used to live, murdered my wife's cousin, a girl of only 15 or 16. She's mangled the poor girl in the most horrible manner so that she lived only a few hours. The victim was immediately buried but had been in her untimely grave only a few hours before she was dug up and examined by the coroner, who decided that she had been killed by a severe beating. This is what happened. She had been told to mind Mrs. Hicks' baby during the night. She fell asleep and the baby cried. She had not slept for several nights and did not hear the crying. She and the infant were both in the room with Mrs. Hicks. When Mrs. Hicks found the girl slow to move, she jumped from her bed, seized a stick of wood by the fireplace, and beat the girl with it, breaking her nose and breastbone. I will not say that this horrid murder did not scandalize the community. It did create a scandal, but not enough to bring the murderers to punishment. A warrant was issued for her arrest, but it was never served. She escaped punishment and even the pain of being brought before a court. While I am telling of bloody deeds which took place during my stay on Colonel Lloyd's plantation, I, re- I will briefly tell of one more, which occurred about the same time as the murder of Denby by Mr. Gore. Colonel Lloyd's slaves were in the habit of spending a part of their nights and Sundays fishing for oysters, so as to make up for their scanty diet. An old man belonging to Colonel Lloyd was oystering and happened to wander beyond the limits of Colonel Lloyd's property and onto the property of Mr. Bill Bonley. Mr. Bonley took offense at this trespass, came down to the shore with his rifle, and shot the poor old man dead. Mr. Bonley came over to see Colonel Lloyd the next day. I don't know whether he came to pay him for his property or to justify what he had done. At any rate, the whole devilish act was soon hushed up. The, there was very little said about it at all, and nothing was done. It was a common saying even among the little white boys, that it was worth a half penny to kill a nigger and half penny to bury one. Chapter 5 from this book. My own treatment while I lived on Colonel Lloyd's plantation was similar to that of the other slave children. I was now old enough to work in the fields, and as there was little besides field work to do, I had a great deal of leisure time. The most I had to do was to drive the cows home at evening, keep the chickens out of the garden, keep the front yard clean, and run errands for Captain Anthony's daughter, Lucretia. Or I spent most of my leisure time helping Colonel Lloyd's young son, Daniel, find birds after he shot them. My connection with Daniel Lloyd was an advantage to me. He became fond of me and protected me. He would not allow the older boys to bother me, and he divided his cakes with me. Captain Anthony seldom whipped me. My greatest suffering was produced by hunger and cold, especially cold. In the hottest summer and the coldest winter, I was kept among almost naked. I had no shoes, no stockings, no jacket, no trousers, nothing but a coarse linen shirt which reached to my knees. I had no bed. I would have died from cold, but on the coldest night I used to steal a bag used for carrying corn to the mill. I would crawl into this bag, then sleep on the cold, damp clay floor with my head inside the bag and my feet out. My feet sometimes so cracked with the frost that I could lay the pen with which I am now writing in the deep gashes. Our food, of course, was cornmeal, boiled into mush. It was put into a large wooden trough and set down on the ground. The children were then called as though we were pigs, and like pigs, we would come to devour the mush. Some ate with their bare hands, some used oyster shells, others a piece of shingle, but none ate with spoons. He that ate fastest got the most, and he that was the strongest got the best place as the trough. Few left with their hunger satisfied. I was probably 7 or 8 years old when I left Colonel Lloyd's plantation. I'll never forget the joy which I learned that Captain Anthony had decided to let me go to Baltimore. There I would live with Hugh Aud, the brother of Captain Anthony's son in law, Thomas Aud. I learned this about 3 days before my departure. During those 3 days, I spent most of my time in the creek, washing off the dirt of the plantation and preparing myself for departure. I washed because Lucretia Aud told me that I had to remove all the dead skin from my feet and knees before I could go to Baltimore. She said that the people in Baltimore were very clean and would laugh at me if I looked dirty. Besides, she was going to give me a pair of trousers which I shouldn't put on until I had removed all the dirt. The thought of owning a pair of trousers was great indeed. It motivated me to scrub until I had removed not only the dirt, but almost my skin. The ties that ordinarily bind children to their homes did not exist in my case. I felt no sadness as she thought of leaving. I was not leaving any loved one. My mother was dead. My grandmother lived far away. I seldom saw her. I had two sisters and one brother who lived in the same house as I, but our early separation from our mother had made us nearly forget that we were related. My cousin Tom had described Baltimore in a way that made me wild with desire to see it. Whenever I had pointed out something beautiful or fine at Great House Farm, Tom had told me that he had seen something far more beautiful or fine in Baltimore. We sailed for Baltimore on a Sunday morning. I remember only the day of the week. because I did not know the days of the month then or the months of the year. From the ship's deck, I looked back at Colonel Lloyd's plantation for what I hoped would be the last time. Early on Sunday morning, we landed at Smith's Wharf in Baltimore. A large flock of sheep was on board. After I helped drive the sheep to a slaughterhouse, a ship hand showed me to my new home. It was on Aliciana Street in the section called Fells Point. Hugh and Sophia Aud met me at the door with their little son Thomas. I saw what I never had seen before, a white face beaming with kindness. This was the face of Sophia Aud. Happiness flashed through my soul. Thomas was told that this was his Freddie, and I was told to take care of Thomas. I entered into the duties of my new home in a most cheerful frame of mind. This is Informed TV 100. Please click the like button. Please click the notification bell, the red bell, so you will get all the videos. And please share these videos. At the end of most videos, there is a icon for Inform TV 100. You can always click on the icon, the eye, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and we will continue with the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, written by himself. My departure from Colonel Lloyd's plantation was one of the most important events of my life. If it hadn't been for this departure, I might have remained a slave. Instead, I am sitting here at my table, enjoying freedom and the happiness of my home, writing this story. Going to live in Baltimore laid the foundation for everything that would follow. I had always seen it as the first plain sight of the kindness with which God had treated me and marked my life with so many favors. That I was chosen to go to Baltimore is a remarkable thing. There were a number of slave children that might have been sent in my place, but I was chosen from among them all. I may be called superstitious and even egotistical in seeing this event as an act of God in my favor, but I would be lying to my own soul if I did not state my opinion. For as long as I can remember, I held the deepest belief that slavery would not be able to hold me in its filthy embrace forever. In the darkest hours of my slavery, this spirit of hope stayed with me like a ministering angel. This good spirit was from God, and to him I offered thanksgiving and praise. Chapter 6. Sophia Aud turned out to be all that she had appeared to be. At our first meeting, a woman of the kindest heart and feeling. Having a slave under her control was new to her. Before her marriage, she had made her own living, a weaver by trade. She had been almost entirely shielded from slavery dehumanizing effects. Because she was unlike any other white woman I had known, I was uncertain how to act towards her. When I behaved in a humble, crouching way, it disturbed rather than pleased her. She did not think it was rude for a slave to look her in the face. Her smiles were heavenly and her voice was peaceful. Soon after I went to live in Baltimore, Sophia Aud kindly taught me the alphabet. After that, she helped me to spell 3 and 4 letter words. But then Hugh Aud discovered what was going on and insisted that his wife stop teaching me. He told her, among other things, that it is unlawful and unsafe to teach a slave to read. If you give a nigger an inch, they will take a mile, he said. Niggers should know nothing other than how to do as they are told, pointing to me. He said, "If you teach the nigger to read, he will be spoiled as a slave. He will become unmanageable and of no value to his master. It will harm him as well. It will make him discontented." These words sank deep into my heart, stirring up thoughts that had until then lain asleep. They explained things that I had not understood before. I now understood the white man's power to enslave the black man. From this moment, I understood the pathway from slavery to freedom. It was just what I wanted, and I got it when I least expected it. While I was sad at the thought of losing the aid of my kind mistress, I was glad to have learned quite by accident something of great worth from my master. As I realized the difficulty of learning without a teacher, I set out with great determination to learn how to read. The very firmness with which Mr. Ott spoke convinced me he deeply believed the truth of what he was saying. What he most dreaded, I most desired. What he most loved, I most hated. That which was to him a great evil to be carefully avoided was to me a great good to be earnestly sought. His arguments only served to inspire me. In order to read, I owe almost as much to the opposition of my master as to the kindly aid of my mistress. Soon after I moved to Baltimore, I became great aware of a difference in the treatment of slaves from which I had seen in the country. A city slave is almost a free man compared with a plantation slave. He is much better fed and clothed and enjoys privileges unknown to the slave on the plantation. There is a shred of decency and a sense of shame that discourages those outbreaks of cruelty so common on the plantation. Only the most evil slaveholder is willing to shock his non slaveholding neighbors with the cries of his beaten slave. This is Inform TV 100. We are reading the narrative, A Life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, written by himself. This is part 6. We are going to conclude this reading session, and we will pick up at part 7, the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass,